Have you ever, like, walked into a specific neighborhood and just felt this undeniable, almost heavy atmosphere?
Oh, absolutely.
You know that feeling, right? Or maybe you turn a corner in a really chaotic, hyper-modern city,
Hmm.
and there's this sudden, I don't know, this inexplicable sense of peace.
Yeah, completely out of nowhere.
Exactly. And you can't quite put your finger on it, but your nervous system just reacts. You feel the vibe of the place, and it feels permanent.
It's a completely universal human experience.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us just brush it off as a passing mood.
Or we assume the local architecture is playing some subtle trick on our psychology.
Right. But we rarely stop to ask if there are actual physical, measurable mechanics driving that exact feeling.
And deciphering those hidden mechanics is our whole mission for today's deep dive.
It's a fascinating one, too.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are unpacking this incredibly dense, fascinating research dossier titled the Magome-cho Spiritual Geospatial Historical Dossier Protocol.
Quite a mouthful.
Yeah, right? But the focus is actually on a very specific area in Tokyo's Oda ward called Magome Town. And the entire goal of this research is to figure out how physical geography fundamentally shapes, human culture, shared trauma, and history over thousands of years.
And it does this in a really unique way.
Yeah, it combines Japanese Shinto cosmology with the literary concept of genius loci, which is basically the spirit of a place.
But before we get lost in the weeds here, we really need to define what this dossier means by spirit. Because it's not what you might think.
Yeah, that is probably the most critical distinction we can make right out of the gate.
Definitely. This dossier explicitly, aggressively even, rejects mystical pseudoscience.
Right. We are not talking about ancient super technologies or like ley lines.
Or paranormal ghost hunts, exactly.
Your goodness.
Right. Instead, it takes traditional Shinto concepts, specifically ideas like ki, which we roughly translate to energy or life force, and it uses them as a highly accurate functional vocabulary.
So these ancient words are being used to describe very real historical, ecological, and geographical phenomena.
Exactly. They provide a framework for understanding how human beings physically interact with the dirt and stone beneath their feet, over millennia.
Right. So if we want to understand the modern atmosphere of Magome, we can't just look at the current street grid.
Not at all.
The dossier argues we have to dig all the way down to the bottom geological layer. We're going back over 3,000 years.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. Geographically, Magome sits right on the edge of the Musashino upland plateau. It is this natural, sharp transition zone between the high ground and the Tokyo lowlands.
And that specific, jagged geographic edge is where this entire story kicks off.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So picture this. It's 1877. An American zoologist named Edward S. Morse is sitting on a steam train traveling from Yokohama to Tokyo.
Wait, literally on a moving train?
Yeah, chugging along. And as the train goes past the edge of this plateau, he happens to be looking out the window, and he spots a massive, thick white streak exposed in the soil cut of the cliff face.
A white streak in the dirt.
Right. And he actually yells to have the train stopped immediately so he can get out and investigate.
That is such an incredible visual, stopping a 19th century train just because you saw a weird white line.
But it paid off. That frantic discovery became the Omori Shell Mound, which is widely considered, the foundational site of all modern Japanese archaeology.
Yeah. But those weren't just random shells, right? They belonged to the ancient Jomon people.
Exactly. And they chose this specific plateau edge for purely practical reasons.
Like what?
Well, it was high enough to be totally safe from flooding. It had freshwater springs, and they could just, walk down the gentle slope to the tidal pools of ancient Tokyo Bay to gather shellfish.
Right, easy access to dinner. But here's the twist. These shell mounds weren't just ancient trash pits where they tossed those dinner scraps.
No, they definitely weren't. Archaeologists found human remains buried right inside them.
Buried in the shell mounds.
Yeah, they did. For the Jomon people, the boundary between the space of the living and the space of the dead simply wasn't separated the way it is in our modern zoning laws.
They just lived right on top of it.
Literally. The shell mounds were where they lived, ate, and buried their ancestors. And in traditional spatial perception, when you have the prolonged accumulation of human remains and organic matter in one very specific elevated location.
Over thousands of years, right?
Right. It creates a persistent base layer of energy, a deep spiritual undercurrent that forms the foundation of the land itself.
They call it Reiki no to you, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but calling it a deep spiritual undercurrent sounds a bit too much like spooky ghost lore for my taste.
You think?
I mean, aren't we just talking about a geological hard drive?
I mean,
Well, you have thousands of years of human organic matter,
Hmm.
generations of living rhythms, literal bones, calcified shells,
sure.
that physically changes the soil composition. It changes the pH balance of the dirt. It changes the actual scent of the earth.
It's
So biology and geology are just creating a permanent physical record. We don't really need to call it a spirit, do we?
I see where you're going, but you're trying to strip the humanity out of it by reducing it to just rocks and pH levels.
Am I?
A little bit, yeah. The reason that dossier uses these Shinto frameworks is because a geological hard drive is dead, but a lived environment is active.
Okay, fair point.
And the physical reality actually supports that active description. Just look at the sensory details from the research.
The part about the smell.
Yes. If you walk into the ruins garden in Tokyo today, where a portion of that shell mound is preserved, you can actually smell it.
That is wild.
Surrounded by one of the most densely populated, hypermodern concrete cities on the planet, there is this distinct, heavy scent of ancient, calcified shells and mineral-rich earth.
It must be such an alien smell in modern Tokyo.
It really is.
Right.
In one breath, you are taking in the physical reality of 3,000 years of compressed time. It is a biological layer, yes, but it affects you on a fundamentally human level.
Point taken. I mean, experiencing 3 millennia in a single scent is pretty incredible.
Right.
So we have this ancient bone-filled cliff edge. How did later societies treat that space?
That's where things get really interesting.
Because moving into the Middle Ages, the dossier shows the people living there essentially weaponizing this geography into a fortress of sacred spaces.
Exactly. We start seeing the establishment of sacred groves called Shinju no Mori.
And the rapid rise of the Hachiman faith, right? Which was this fusion of Shinto and Buddhism that was extremely popular with the samurai class.
Yes. And the placement of those shrines and sacred groves was incredibly strategic.
They weren't just scattered randomly.
No, not at all. They were placed directly on the natural geographic boundaries of the plateau.
Which introduces this concept of chizukai, or boundaries.
And more specifically, the concept of a kekai.
Right.
Historically, a kekai is a ritualistic barrier. It's a defined boundary meant to separate the sacred, ordered interior space from the chaotic, profane outside world.
So in the medieval mind, building a shrine at the edge of the cliff was defining the absolute limit of their safe universe.
Exactly.
I have to ask, though, is a kekai supposed to be some sort of magical, invisible force field?
Why do you ask?
Because from a modern perspective, this just looks like very clever medieval urban planning dressed up in religious vocabulary.
It kind of does.
Right. You plant some trees, you build a gate, you call it sacred, and boom, you have a controlled property line.
Well, what's fascinating here is that it is brilliant urban planning, but the barrier is absolutely real.
Well, how?
It's just that its mechanics are acoustic and ecological, not magical.
Oh, acoustic.
Yeah, think about your own experience stepping off a roaring city street and walking into a dense park or a historical grove.
The noise just trucks away.
Exactly. The dossier notes that inside these groves, there is a measurable physical drop in acoustic frequency.
Really? A measurable drop.
Yes. The thick, multi-layered canopy of ancient broadleaf trees and the deep layers of fallen leaves, they actively absorb modern engine noise, sirens, the general hum of the city.
Like natural noise cancellation.
Exactly. A kekai works because the geography and ecology have been engineered to block out the outside world. Your heart rate literally drops.
Because your body feels the barrier. The microforest is basically acting as a sensory and ecological buffer.
That makes total sense when you put it like that.
You cross the threshold, the noise vanishes, the temperature drops 3 degrees in the shade. Your nervous system instantly registers that you have entered a sanctuary.
And they figured this out hundreds of years ago.
So over thousands of years, they've built these geographic and sensory buffers. But what happens when an apocalyptic event strikes and those ancient buffers are pushed to their absolute breaking point?
We find out on September 1st, 1923.
The Great Kanto Earthquake.
Yeah. It wasn't just a tremor, it was a disaster that fundamentally shattered Tokyo.
The devastation was unimaginable.
The violent shaking triggered massive soil liquefaction in the lowlands, which was immediately followed by uncontrollable sweeping firestorms.
The death toll was staggering. Over 100,000 people died.
It was apocalyptic. But here's the thing. The Magome Plateau survived.
Because of its elevation, right? The ground was solid enough to escape the liquefaction.
Right, and because it wasn't packed with the same density of fragile wooden structures as the low-lying areas, the firestorms didn't sweep over the cliff.
It became this literal island of safety.
And that physical reality triggers a massive, frantic migration. Displaced writers, artists, and intellectuals fled the burning lowlands and moved up onto the plateau.
And that migration formed what became famously known as the Magome Literary Village.
It resulted in one of the most incredible concentrations of creative minds in a very short period of time.
You have monumental figures moving there, like the future Nobel laureate Yasunari Kawabata.
And Chio Uno, a pioneering female writer who later became a massive fashion entrepreneur.
Right, so you have these intense, brilliant, traumatized people all ending up living in extremely close proximity on this one surviving hill.
And the dossier dives deep into the messy reality of this era. It analyzes the chaotic bohemian relationships between these writers.
Specifically, the complex, highly volatile love-hate dynamic between Kawabata and Uno.
Yeah, the creative output pouring out of this village was staggering.
And the dossier analyzes this through Shinto, right? The idea that intense, unpacified human emotions leave a lasting imprint on the land itself.
Exactly. It argues that Kawabata's famous aesthetic of mono no aware, which is this deep, beautiful, almost painful awareness of the impermanence of all things, was physically shaped by his geography.
Because he is sitting on a safe, quiet plateau, literally looking down at the ruined, smoldering, shifting ashes of Tokyo below him.
It's a haunting image.
It is. But let's be entirely pragmatic for a second here.
Oh, here we go.
Couldn't we just call this a 1920s housing crisis?
A housing crisis?
Yeah. I mean, the city burned down. Rents were cheap on the hill, the houses weren't currently on fire, and the ground wasn't turning into soup.
Well, yes, but
Calling it a lasting emotional imprint feels like we are overcomplicating basic human survival instincts. They went where they wouldn't die.
I see your point. But if you just categorize it as a housing crisis, you are ignoring what actually happened to the culture after they arrived.
Okay, how so?
Yes, survival instinct drove them up the hill. But the Shinto framework looks at the result. You suddenly have an intense concentration of human trauma, survivor's guilt, and explosive modernist creative genius all packed into a few square miles.
So it's like a pressure cooker.
Exactly. From a spatial perspective, that migration concentrated the energy of the culture in one place.
I see.
The sheer intensity of their shared trauma and their artistic output layered a new, modern, hypercharged emotional land spirit right on top of that ancient Jomon foundation.
So the trauma changed the atmosphere of the neighborhood just as definitively as the ancient shells changed the soil composition. That is actually a fascinating way to look at modern gentrification or disaster migration. The history of the earth and the history of human trauma are just compounding, layering on top of each other.
They're completely intertwined.
But geography, no matter how elevated or stable, can only protect you from terrestrial threats.
Right.
It protects you from the rising sea level, it protects you from the earthquake. But what happens when the threat changes entirely and destruction rains down from above?
Then the buffer fails. And that is the tragic turning point for the Magome Literary Village.
Fast forward to 1945.
The Tokyo air raids.
Swarms of B-29 bombers dropped massive payloads of incendiary bombs across the city.
The cliff edge and some sacred trees cannot deflect fire from the sky.
No. And the physical remnants of the literary village, the houses where they wrote, the gardens where they argued, their meeting places, they were largely incinerated or just abandoned.
The community was violently disbanded.
And the human toll is just unimaginable.
It is.
The dossier points out that this kind of sudden mass casualty event creates something deeply unsettling in the cultural psyche.
Yes, it introduces the concept of wenbo-toke.
Which means?
Well, in Japanese tradition, the dead require specific rituals and descendants to honor them, to anchor their memory to a specific place.
Right.
But when tens of thousands of people are wiped out instantly in a firestorm, whole families disappear, there is no one left to perform the rites, and no physical graves left to visit.
You are left with untethered spirits.
Exactly. Wenbo-toke refers to these unpacified, unconnected spirits. A massive volume of lingering grief with nowhere to go.
And the immediate aftermath of the war offered absolutely no time or space to process that grief.
None at all.
Yeah.
During the post-war economic boom in the 1950s and 60s, Japan experienced this desperate, frantic rush to rebuild and modernize.
The dossier describes this era as society pouring a concrete seal over its trauma.
That's a perfect way to put it. They didn't have the luxury of mourning. They just paved over the ash and laid down modern infrastructure, asphalt and concrete, as fast as humanly possible.
But burying trauma under asphalt doesn't actually get rid of it, does it?
No, it eventually leaks out.
Which brings us to the 1970s. Decades after the concrete was poured, local citizens and historians in Oda Ward started this grassroots effort to reclaim what was lost.
They started setting up these modest, rusted metal plaques and designating specific walking trails.
Just to mark the exact geographic spots where the famous writers of the Magome Literary Village used to live and work.
Right. And on paper, it sounds like a totally mundane municipal tourism project.
But the dossier argues this act of historical mapping was actually a secular form of pacification, a chinkan.
Yes. It's a vital act of cultural maintenance.
How does that work? Exactly.
Well, by locating the exact geographic coordinates where these people survived, loved, and created art, and physically driving a metal plaque with a name into that spot, they were anchoring the memory.
Nice.
Giving a tragedy or a legacy a specific name and a defined boundary is how you settle that wandering, untethered grief we talked about.
They were forcing the modern city to acknowledge the profound history buried right under the concrete.
Exactly.
I think about this constantly when walking through any major city. Putting up a little historical plaque next to a modern parking garage isn't just for tourists to read.
No, it serves a deeper purpose.
It's almost like a form of urban therapy.
Urban therapy, I like that.
You know, you are forcing a pause. You are acknowledging that something profound, maybe a horrific tragedy or a beautiful stroke of creative genius, happened right in the exact spot where someone is now just standing on their balcony drying their laundry.
That juxtaposition is the defining experience of the modern city.
It really is.
When you walk past that plaque, you are slammed with two timelines at once. You have the deep, heavy, often painful historical tragedy represented by the marker.
And right next to it, you have a humming neon vending machine.
Exactly. The utter banality of the modern streetscape rubbing up against millennia of survival.
That stark, almost jarring contrast is the ultimate modern realization of mono no aware, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It forces you to feel the beautiful, fragile impermanence of the world you're standing in.
It demands that you see the layers.
Yes.
Okay, we've traveled from 3000 BC all the way to the neon streets of the modern day.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. Pulling all of these eras together, what is the ultimate truth of Magome's spirit?
Well, the dossier reaches this groundbreaking, overarching meta-conclusion. It defines the Magome Plateau as a topographic cultural memory buffer.
A topographic cultural memory buffer. That's wow.
It's a brilliant synthesis if you look at the pattern we just traced.
Right. Every single time human society faced total collapse, the Jomon dealing with shifting ancient sea levels, the 1923 earthquake liquefying the lowlands,
The 1945 bombings wiping out the grid.
and even the rapid destructive urbanization of the 1960s.
Every time, the physical height and the solid ground of the plateau acted as a safe room. The geography itself was the buffer protecting the culture.
So the Shinto land spirit, the Chirei, it isn't some ethereal ghost hovering over the town.
No, it is the geography itself.
The literal dirt, the specific elevation, the density of the soil, acting as a massive silent protector across millennia.
The dossier calls it a topographic mutualism.
Meaning the land physically protects the people during disasters, and in return, the people imbue the land with meaning, memory, and art.
Exactly. True reverence for a place doesn't require us to invent magical myths or paranormal fairy tales.
Right.
The most profound respect comes from looking at the dirt and recognizing that this specific physical geography has faithfully caught us every single time we've fallen for the last 5,000 years.
The earth itself is the guardian of our memory.
It is.
Which brings us right to your front door. If you are listening to this, you might hear a term like spiritual tourism and think it sounds completely mystical.
Like you need a quartz crystal to feel the vibe of a neighborhood.
Right. But this dossier proves that the spirit of a place is just the incredible literal reality of the earth keeping our culture alive. Geology dictates history.
It really does.
So I have to ask you, where is the memory buffer in your own city?
That's the real question.
When the next crisis hits, what high ground will your community run to? Where is the geographic safe room in your neighborhood?
It completely changes how you look at a daily commute. You stop looking at the map as just a grid of streets and coffee shops. You start looking at contours, natural elevations, and fault lines.
You start looking for where the sanctuary is hidden in plain sight.
Exactly.
It really does shift your perspective. To recap the incredible journey of this dossier today, we started with ancient Jomon shell mounds acting as a literal biological hard drive.
Then we moved up into the medieval era to find acoustic sensory boundaries created by sacred groves.
We witnessed a trauma-fueled literary renaissance born on the high ground after a devastating earthquake.
And finally, we saw the concrete seals of post-war Tokyo pierced by acts of urban therapy.
And all of it, every single era of human struggle, was held safe by the physical embrace of a single geographic plateau in Magome.
It is a remarkable legacy of human and geographic survival.
It really is.
And it leaves me with one final, slightly unnerving thought to mull over.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if natural geography, like the Magome Plateau, has faithfully acted as a dependable hard drive and a cultural buffer for thousands of years, what happens to our collective memory right now?
Oh, because we're building differently now.
Exactly. We are increasingly building entirely artificial landscapes. When millions of us live on land reclaimed from the ocean or in massive underground city grids that have no natural elevation whatsoever, what kind of cultural buffers are we engineering?
That's a scary thought.
Right? When the people of the future dig up our ruins 3,000 years from now, what will our artificial concrete layers tell them about how we protected our culture?
That is a deeply chilling but fascinating question to walk away with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Magome dossier. Next time you step out your front door, take a moment to feel the slope of the pavement under your shoes. Take a closer look at the hidden history beneath your own feet. You never know what ancient buffer might be holding you up.